Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And just a reminder to mute yourself, please. And we're going to be talking about manifesting. And one of the things, envisioning. So I've been thinking about manifesting and visioning a lot these days, you know, not just for myself, but where we are in the world, in hopes that, you know, visioning peace and just peace will be helpful as the collective world view right now. So we're going to be talking mostly about personal today, but just know that you can vision a better world for everyone, and that collective energy is incredibly powerful. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's see, sorry. Okay, hold on one sec here. Okay, manifesting. So this is the best definition that I've found that resonates with me, and it's from Gabby Bernstein, and she is quite the leader right now. She's doing a whole month on manifesting, but this really, really spoke to me. Cultivating the experience that you want to feel, and then living and believing in that experience so you can allow it to come into form. And we're going to be talking about that all throughout this morning. So again, cultivating that the experience that you want to feel, and then living and believing in that experience so you can allow it to come into form. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. And other ways to think about manifesting and visioning. So change your thoughts. So many of the great leaders in this, you know, in the spiritual world and in the world know that, you know, thoughts are things. So if you change your thoughts, you can change your perception and change, you know, your trajectory. So this quote, again, really resonated with me. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, so I want to share a few stories with you about my manifesting in my life. That I've been thinking about, and just kind of acknowledging for the first time in my life that I guess I've been a pretty good manifester over the years. So I wanted to share some stories and just tell you how they came about. So at 13, I wanted to be Barbara Walters in New York City. And for those of you who don't know, Barbara Walters was one of the first women TV anchors ever on the planet. And I wanted to be her. And because she was interviewing all these really interesting people, and it just seemed really glamorous for a little girl living, you know, in North Seattle in an apartment, to think big and to think about, you know, being in New York. And it was just seriously just, it was so important to me, and like this goal and vision, that I even had image or posters in my room at that point of New York, which here we New York, LA, and Chicago, because those were the three biggest media markets in all of the United States. So I was visioning, you know, from a very young woman, young teenager, of, you know, things that I could create for myself. So in Seattle, for those of you who don't live here, there is a heightened subway. It's called the monorail, and it goes from the Space Needle at the Seattle Center, which is very iconic for Seattle, to downtown Seattle. So when I was in high school, I would ride the monorail. When I was downtown, I would go back and forth, and I would always stand on the side of the monorail and look down on this television station called Como TV. It's an ABC affiliate here in Seattle. Well, anyway, I would just say, I'm going to work there someday. I'm going to work there someday. And I was lucky enough to go to a high school here in Seattle that had a radio and TV program. And, you know, I worked really hard and worked in that radio and TV program in high school, but I started work at Como TV at 17. And that is the power of visioning. And, you know, I was 17 years old. I worked there for 4 years doing everything from tour guide to a production assistant. And then ultimately, here's a little picture of the monorail. But ultimately, I ended up going to San Francisco and working in the newsroom there, and then back to Seattle to another TV station. And within 2 years of working in the newsroom by age of 24, so I'd been in like radio and television for 8 years. By the time of 24, I had a midlife or a quarter life crisis. I'm like, this isn't my goal. This isn't my vision for my life. But I did make it happen to understand that that's not what I wanted. It took me a while, but that's the power of visioning. So another story is that as I got older, one of the really important things for me is that I had a really busy life. I started a PR firm after my TV career, and I wanted to have a cabin as an escape to get away from, quote, everyday life. And so some friends of mine gave me some antique snowshoes, kind of like the ones here. And I put them downstairs in my house in a very visible place. And every time I went downstairs, my mantra was, those are going in my cabin. Those are going in my cabin. So the dream, was alive because those were going to go in my cabin. So here's the cabin that I bought with actually Monica Smith, the co-creator of RevelEleven. Little did I know that when I was thinking about having a cabin, I had no idea that this moment in time, I would say I found a cabin that I'm really interested in to my best friend. And she goes, oh, I'll go in on that with you. So be open to opportunities. So I went back and looked through some photos and I found the snowshoes. And here is our little house. This is we actually sold it about 7 years ago, but those are the snowshoes that were my dream, and there they are. So, then the other dream that I had for a long time, which was inspired by my mom, she was a single mom in the 60s and 70s, and she was all about women. So when I was 10, we would go out and march in women's rights marches. It's like, what do you want? Women's rights. When do you want them? Now. And, I just remember like we were always out and about, focusing on women politicians, and my mom had the first Ms. Magazine in her office, and she was just all about women. So of course that translated to me, and I've always wanted to work with women and ultimately have a retreat center. So about 10 years ago, I started having women's events at my house. And then, time went on and we were having an amazing time. That at that point it was called the Wine Soiree, and it evolved into Grapevine, which is now RevelEleven, and through a series of events, and Monica is my co-creator in this whole thing again, and so we now hold retreats for women. This is at our yoga studio in Roslyn, which is about 90 miles outside of Seattle, and we do snowshoeing events, yoga, riding, hiking, and more. And then this was an event that we did about 2 years ago now in Bryson, Zion. That's Monica and I on the right, and then a group of women that we shared our time with there. So what I'm saying is that there is, if you set your mind to something, there's a beautiful quote in the book called The Alchemist, and it's like, once you have a dream, all the universe conspires to make it happen. And you don't always know what the timing is, and I'm going to share some interesting things with you in just a moment. But I thought I would give you some tips that have helped me make my dreams and visioning a reality. So what's blossoming within you? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And here are some of those tips. So keep the vision in mind. Vision the vision and keep the end in mind. So when I had those snowshoes, I saw the vision inside my cabin, right? Very clear. Vision the vision and keep the end in mind. Be very specific. I want to start a retreat center. I want to have that job at Como TV. It was very, very specific. The universe responds to you being very specific about what you want. Know in your heart of hearts that it's going to happen. I can tell you that those 3 instances that I just shared with you, I knew hands down that it was going to happen. Now, of course, I've gone through other things that I thought that I was going to be successful at, but I never had the clear vision that I did with these instances. So that clear visioning and being very specific is important. So with all of this, visioning how you'll feel. Like when I thought about the cabin, I'm like, I love to cross country ski. So I found a place. I didn't know that Winthrop, Washington was the place that I was going to have the cabin. I looked all around the Pacific Northwest. But I knew that cross country skiing was a big thing for me. And Winthrop has tons of cross country ski trails. And I knew I wanted it to be cozy. I wanted it to have a view. And so as you saw in that photo, it was a cozy little house on the hill. So simple ongoing affirmations. I'm going to work there. Those are going on the wall of my cabin. So whatever your dream is, just keep it very simple. I'm going to run a retreat center for women. So again, ongoing affirmations, and we'll talk about some other ways in which to do this next. So in order to make these dreams and realities happen, you need to be able to you need to commit to it yourself. You need to know, again, like in your heart of hearts, that it's going to happen, but you've got to do something about it. You can't just go, okay, universe, I'm ready for the best relationship in my life. I'm ready for that job at Como TV. You have to do 1, 3, 5 things a day. You can skip a day for sure, but just know that you have to do something in order to make your reality happen. I'll share one thing. I had an opportunity a couple years ago to start a coffee company with some friends, and I didn't tell anybody. It took me a year, but I did one thing. I committed to doing one thing every day to start that coffee company. And now we're distributed on Amazon and we have national distribution, but I did one thing every day to make that happen. And it happened within a year that the company started. Oops. Okay, remain open. So for instance, with the cabin, I didn't know Monica was going to say, I'll be your partner in that. Like, how amazing. All I knew is I wanted to have a cabin. So you always hear sometimes that just, when people used to be on planes all the time, you would hear like, oh my gosh, been thinking about this idea and I sat next to this person on the plane. And it's like, oh my gosh, it was this serendipitous event, or, it just happens all the time. You just don't know that once you have the dream and all the universe conspires to make it happen, what will actually happen. So timing is everything. And I want to share 2 specific thoughts on this, is that the Queen's Gambit has been such a huge success, right? 62 million Americans have watched the Queen's Gambit since October. But very few people know that book came out 30 years ago. The producers actually signed on the dotted line to make that into a movie. But it took 30 years for that to happen. And look at the wild success that it has had in the last 4 or 5 months. Now, it probably wouldn't have been that successful, and they had a very huge concern about people thinking that chess was cool. But look at the timing. It was magic. The other one, and I'm sure most of you know this story, but J.K. Rowling presented her manuscript 12 times before it was actually picked up by a publisher. And she had an agent during that time. So it took her 5 years to write the books, but then it took, a total of 7 years for her to actually get the first publication. So be patient. So make an altar. So I had an altar in a way with those snowshoes, but you could do something that is, it can be a candle. I have my candle lit right here. It could be some crystals or some meaningful items that you have in your house. But, just like I did with, saying something very specific, you can do that to an altar and it's just as powerful. So I would encourage making an altar. And then the power of journaling. I've been journaling since I was very young, since I was, 13, going back to that number. And it's just very powerful to write it out. And and not necessarily in a computer, but like in a good old journal. Here's my journal. I write in it every day. I've got all sorts of things in it, my workout schedule, my loves, my highs, my lows, all of those things. But my journal has been my best friend. And particularly during this time, when we're going through unprecedented change worldwide, like your journaling is so important right now. It's just, it brings you home. It brings you back to yourself. Um, Draw out your vision. So, you can write it out, you can draw it out. And as I was thinking about this class, when I first wanted to buy my home, my first house, I drew in my journal my house, and so I bought a little Craftsman. This was years and years ago here in Seattle, and it was exactly the drawing that I drew. The Craftsmans are pretty basic. They're like this, right? And they have a door, and then they have two windows on each side. That was the exact house I bought. And it was the third house that I put an offer on. But I went back, it was years later. I'm like, oh my God, that's the house that I drew. Anyway, so think about how you will feel when you get there. And we talked about that a little bit already, but think about how you put yourself in the position of where you want to be, whether it's that job, that relationship, anything, but how are you going to feel when you get there? Very important. And then, like that example I just gave about the house, like keep your journal, but put it down and don't read it necessarily. And then I wanted to share a story about Tariah Trent, who wrote the book, The Awakened Woman. And she grew up in a small village in Zimbabwe. And she has a powerful story about having dreams of, this little girl in a village in Zimbabwe. And her mom told her to write down her dreams and to bury it somewhere nearby. And if you want an inspiring story about visioning and manifesting, I highly encourage that book. Again, it's called The Awakened Woman by Tariah Trent. I'll send that out to you after this presentation. But anyway, so bury it. It could be, in your garden. It could be at a park. It could be anywhere, or you can burn it and just let the universe take it away. So those are my tips. And now we're going to ground before we start into the journaling. So light your candle. I've already had mine lit. It's always a nice way. Get a little comfy. And I'm just so pleased that Ellen can join us this morning. She's going to do a little sound healing for us before we start to journal. So Ellen, will you share about sound healing and what you'll be doing in the next couple of minutes? Your microphone's off.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you so much for being here this morning. I'm just so grateful.
Thank you for having me, and good morning, everyone, again. So, sound healing, there's a huge history to it, but my particular story is that it came to me as I began a healing practice many, many years ago. It's a long story, but to make it very short, the guides that were working with me at that time and continue to work with me one day said, I want you to put this particular sound into this person's knee. And I was like, absolutely not. And I got a horrific headache for a few months until I connected the dots and began to realize that they were asking me or insisting that I use my voice. At that time, I had a huge judgment about my voice, but I persisted, and the results were just amazing. So, the sound is channeled energy of light, is the best way to describe it. And today, I just want to give you a little sampling to ground you and also to help your hearts, because I think everyone's heart right now is just been feeling a lot. So, if you would just get into a comfortable place, you can sit or you can lay down, it doesn't really matter. You might just want to put your hands over your heart just to connect with your heart and just take a deep breath in. You can leave your eyes open or you can close them, whatever feels most comfortable to you. And just take another breath and just notice without any judgment. Does the breath go in easily or not? And just now simply take another deep breath in. And this time, as I begin to do the sounding, all you have to do is to receive. If there's anything you want to release, any fears, any concerns, any upset, whatever it is, any grief, just put that intention out to release it and just allow the sound to alchemize your feelings. And take a nice deep breath in, just allowing the sound to move its way through your being. And if you want, you might want to wiggle your fingers and toes and just allow yourself to come back to the room. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Beautiful, Ellen.
Oh, thank
Uh,
you.
I think that I'm completely feel differently already. Thank you.
Good. Yay.
If you'd like to share in the chat how that made you feel, we would love that. We're going to continue on with the journaling session. So thank you, Ellen, again, so much.
Thank you.
So grateful. So talk about gratitude, which is, I just wanted to share this because I feel like gratitude is so important as we are visioning and thinking about manifesting things in our life. And this is a great quote from Eckhart Tolle. Acknowledging the good that you already have in your life is the foundation for all abundance. Acknowledging the good that you already have in your life is the foundation for all abundance. Thank you. And let's just see in the chat here. Making that dream come true. We'll be recording Will the recording be shared with participants? Yes, thank you. It will be. Okay, let's talk about journaling. So why don't we take about 2 minutes per question? There's 5 questions. And the first one is, let me just explain this question first. 2020 was hard. It was really hard on so many different levels for all of us. But there was also an opportunity to feel certain things that you might want to bring into 2021 from this year. So why don't you take just 2 minutes to write out, and I'll time this for you. So go ahead and get started. Okay, just a few more seconds. Okay, the next question is, what challenges did you overcome? What strengths in yourself? Let's see, sorry, oops, Oop. Don't look at that one. See, how do I get, oh no. Okay, don't look at those other ones, sorry. Okay, you overcame challenges. What strengths in yourself did you find? And 2 minutes for that. So what strengths in yourself did you realize that you want to bring into 2021? Okay, next question. So this is really important. So in order to be whole, you need to put yourself first. How will you nurture your mind, body, and spirit in 2021? And if you can't think about the whole year, I think it's really important to think in quarters, so in 90 days. So in the next 90 days, how will you nurture your mind, body, and spirit for whatever time frame you think about. You know, for your body, is it yoga? Is it just nourishing it? How about your mind? And then how will you feed your spirit? So go ahead and write about that. Okay, the next question is, what do you want to manifest in the next 90 days? And you can think about a year, but it's so much easier to think in those 90 days time frames. So if you have a goal, again, you know, you can be patient. You can work on that 90 days. You can work on 1 year, 2 years. But what can you accomplish in the next 90 days towards that goal? Be very clear in your intention. Let's take 2 minutes here. It'll take about 15 more seconds. Okay, and finally, will you commit to do something or 3 things every day towards your goal? And how will you do this? So this is, like I said, this is really important to tell the universe. If you have a dream, all the universe conspires to make it happen, but you have to do something to tell the universe that you're serious, right? So really think through this. Can you commit to doing 1 to 3 things or more every day towards your goal? And what will that look like for you? So let's take 2 minutes here. You have about 30 more seconds. Okay. I would love for you to share in the chat how you're feeling now, how you're feeling about manifesting your vision for the new year or the next 90 days. How was this for you? Will you please share in the chat? And I would encourage you to, spend more time with these questions. 2 minutes is a very short amount of time to think these through when, I think we all have big ideas about things that we want to accomplish and, big or small. So I went back and I did a solstice journaling session a couple of weeks ago, and I sat down about a week later and I went through all of the questions, and it was such a great experience for me to go through the questions as well. So I encourage you to, take this time and more time to really think these through. If you want some more questions, the solstice video is on our website at RevelEleven.com. And let's just talk about these. I'm feeling off to a good start. I think I like thinking about the 90 days out rather than the entirety of 2021. And Monica, I have to tell you that that's been huge for me. And then to break out that 90 days into 30 days, and then you have something you can really work with. Because if you think about 365 days, it's just too much. And we know what happens when we make resolutions, they don't happen. So manifesting in baby steps, I like breaking it down into quarters of the year. So thanks, Angela. So I wanted to tell you about something that I'm going to start. Monica and I are starting a new program in spring to talk about intentions, and it will be called the Ignite Your Intentions series. And we'll be meeting every other week. So there will be 7 meetings within that time. It's going to start in March. So weekly inspirations to your inbox. We'll have speakers, and it's a very limited amount of people. So if you'd like more information about that class, it's on the RevelEleven.com website, and you can go there. And Ellen has an amazing class that she'd like to tell you about as well. Go ahead, Ellen.
Thank you. So I don't have any links yet, but I'm going to be teaching a course on cultivating joy called The Joy Maker, because what I've come to the conclusion is that, we often think when I get X, I'll be happy. When I get Y, I will feel all this joy. But it's actually the opposite way. It's so we fill ourselves up with joy, as Joanie was saying,
Yep.
and then it makes manifesting what we want so much easier. So if you're interested, you can PM me, you can get my information.
I'll send out your email
Okay,
afterwards.
perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I have to say, I've been working with Ellen for years, and she's amazing. So, and her Cultivating Joy video, she did one for RevelEleven. It's also on the RevelEleven website, so you can see it there. And I have to say, I was blown away by that Cultivating Joy piece that you did, Ellen. So thank you. I'd love to invite you tomorrow. We have yoga at 8 a.m. Our schedule is online as well. And then we have some terrific speakers coming up. We have midlife sex we're talking about on Monday. And then we have everything from forest bathing to parenting and all sorts of other things this month. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's such a joy to have this community. It has fed my soul since it's fed my soul for 4 years that we've been doing this with RevelEleven, but it certainly has been an amazing gift to do this to have this online community during this time. Thank you for taking your time this morning to join us.